Welcome to Simply Enough. This is Zachary and Elizabeth, and thanks for tuning in.
If you're liking our podcast, we'd love it if you'd share with your friends and family.
And then rate and review to raise our visibility and spread the message of enoughness.
We love you, and remember, you are simply enough.
Just as you are.
Period. Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome back to Simply Enough.
Because, even 2024, that sounds long, right?
Yeah.
And so just like an academic year, rather than just looking at freshman year and sophomore year and junior year, this is the quarter of the year. So it adds a little spiciness to what otherwise, might seem drawn out and, dare I say, monotonous and mundane.
Yeah. And I have to tell you, one of the things that gave me so much peace as I'm sitting there was this idea that I could allow myself to just have the awkwardness of the fresh start. Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome back to Simply Enough. I'm Mr. Zachary Leonard.
And I'm Dr. Elizabeth Ignacio. Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year 2024. We kick off with this brand new episode. In previous episodes, Elizabeth, we have shared just our own philosophies about resolutions and objectives and New Year's and whatnot. And I come to this episode with I just want to share what goes through my mind when we think about the new year, et cetera, in the hopes that maybe it sparks something for you or something for our listeners. But, when I was an administrator in schools, so often students would come at the beginning of a new year and they would look forward to what they called like a fresh start. They would get a new set of teachers. There would be new friends in the class. You would also see at the end of a school year, students really needing to go away and take a summer break, and maybe some relationships had kind of gone through an ebb and flow, and that could have been with some of their teachers, with their friends, but they were ready to just kind of take a break and then come back, and they were really looking forward to this fresh start, so to speak. And I like to think of a new year along those lines, and it is in many ways an arbitrary fresh start, so to speak. We have decided that January 1st is the beginning of a new year, but I still like thinking about the idea that we can start new. We can start fresh with something, and we get to decide that. And we can do that on February 1st or March 1st. But I throw that out there as just a way that I go into thinking about the new year, and the energy that can come from giving oneself permission to start fresh, to begin anew, or to begin afresh. And I have a little story that I want to use to kind of kick this off, if that's okay.
Yes.
So I've talked about how I went abroad in college. This has been many other episodes that I've mentioned this, but going back into my junior year at Notre Dame, having been in London for the fall semester, I came back feeling like I wasn't necessarily connected with my friends and connected with the school. Like much of the school had a semester alone. Like they had the football season and they had the fall and to come back and to now have a new roommate, but in January, and you're with your roommate half the year, they've been there the other half of the year. Everything just felt a little wonky, right? Mm-hmm. And it was an odd feeling. It really was an odd feeling to be back on campus and to be there as if like I was joining in the middle of something, right? Even though it all felt familiar. And often I would go to the grotto on campus, which is this beautiful place where there's a statue of Mary and there are candles and people sit there in a moment of reflection and prayer and whatnot. And I would often go there, particularly during my freshman year when I was doing a lot of discerning about whether or not I had made the right quote unquote decision to be in South Bend, Indiana at a Catholic university, knowing that I was struggling with my own sexual orientation and identity and everything. So I found myself back at the grotto quite often that first week back on campus. And I have to tell you, one of the things that gave me so much peace as I'm sitting there was this idea that I could allow myself to just have the awkwardness of the fresh start, that I could just allow myself to live in that place of a fresh new beginning, which is going to be great or wonky or any word that you can put in there. It could be all of those things, but it didn't really matter how we qualified it because it was still just a fresh start. It was still a fresh beginning. And, it was a pretty wonderful moment as, a junior in college to realize that even in some of those times when things feel like they just don't make a whole lot of sense, that you can still give yourself permission to just lean into them, and also just
Mhm.
like find comfort in that time, in that, in that that launch, that beginning. And I've never really let that go. And why I bring it up is because I don't necessarily always think about it in terms of the new year, but I do think about it in terms of new beginnings. And the new year for many of
Mhm.
us is a new beginning. And whether, and we've talked about objectives or resolutions or whatnot, whether there is some kind of energy that I put out at the beginning of the year, it doesn't necessarily, I don't want to say it doesn't necessarily matter for me, what that actual goal is or the resolution or what my hope is, because I've also found tremendous comfort in just knowing that it's a fresh beginning. It's just a fresh start. And I don't know if that really makes sense, that last part that I said there. Um, but I bring
It
that up
totally
today.
did.
It does. Okay, good, good. Because I can get into my head a little bit about what my thoughts are. I'm not sure if they really translate. But rather than hold on to the new year is the start of something, it's just another start of something. It's another
Mhm.
fresh start to something else. It's a way to begin anew. I use that to kick off our episode today.
I love that. I'm a professor, right?
Mm-hmm.
For the med school for residency. You are an educator and
Mm-hmm.
administrator, so very much in academics. And I have to say that I actually envy students. I envied my medical students, my residents. I envied my kids in that it is wonderful that sense every quarter
Mm-hmm.
where they're like, okay, well, I got that grade that past quarter. So here's a fresh start to the
Mm-hmm.
new quarter. And, even in med school, the calendar year is
Mm-hmm.
broken up in terms of rotations, whether you're on the surgery rotation or internal medicine rotation or psychiatry rotation. So there's built in as a student many opportunities for fresh starts. And in listening to you, I just realized, well, just because we're adults and out of school, we are students in the school of life. Why wouldn't we allow ourselves our calendar year to actually, let's say, be broken up into quarters? And that way, if one quarter didn't quite go the way that we liked it, we learn from that quarter. And then the second quarter of the year, we can, attempt anew, or honestly, abandon and go on to a different rotation or a different course, and see, if we will flourish there. So I love that idea of, yes, January 1st, start of a new year. That is awesome. But how about we have a new year every quarter, if you know what I mean? Because
Mm-hmm.
there's such excitement to that sensation. And there is, actually agency in recognizing, okay, well, I can't control 12 months, but let me control things 90 days at a time or 120 days at a time. um, and perhaps that will not only make things more manageable but more quote successful, for however one might define success, or make the year more balanced, and whether it's goals, resolutions, or objectives, more reachable by you know um, making things smaller that way. um, and I just find it funny that while we might as adults think, oh, well, breaking up the year in quarters like students do, and they get summer off and
Yep.
that kind of thing, how artificial is that? Well, the flip side is it's just as artificial to call 365 days a
A
year.
year. Yeah.
Like, that's, a modern way of calling a year a year. And not everybody calls a year the way Western society calls a year. The lunar Chinese year is a different measurement of a year. So why can't we on our own decide, I'm going to celebrate New Year every quarter.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to name the year 3 months,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's
Yes.
exciting to think of it that way. It's actually, invigorating and kind of, I don't know, youthful. It kind of
Mm-hmm.
it makes me remember what it's like to have, to be a student, have ownership of the trajectory every quarter, for
Mhm.
example, or every, month's rotation, like in med school. And it kind of breaks up, I'll say this as an adult in terms of adulting, it breaks up what might be perceived as monotony
Mhm.
of same old, same old. I'm going to, live tomorrow just like how I lived today. Well, if we break it up and say, okay, well, for this quarter, I'm looking to do this or experience this, and then next quarter can be different. It definitely does break up the monotony, and is that not the very definition of new and fresh?
Absolutely. And I love where we're going with this because shortly after I graduated from college, I moved to New York City with my brother and a friend of mine. And a friend of mine got right in and got a job and was working kind of in corporate America. And she suffered much of what we're talking about, which is she went from being so trained as a student to have these kind of benchmark times throughout the year, these like end of a quarter, end of a semester, et cetera, to like, okay, now you're just working full time, right?
Yes,
And and
exactly.
and it was such a shift from what she had been trained in. And um I had forgotten the number of times we would have the conversation because I was still in grad school while working full time. So I still had those kind of benchmark, moments and throughout the year, whereas she was just getting up and going to work every day. And how difficult it was for her to see life kind of in this monotonous, infinite way, which is like, okay, for the next 30 years, I'm
Mm-hmm.
gonna get up and go to work. When the real moment came when she was like, it doesn't have to be that way for me, right? Like
Yes.
maybe my job is, routinized in the way where I expect the same thing over and over again, but that doesn't have to be my approach to it. Or I can think about it
Mm-hmm.
in terms of any chunk of time or goal or unit or whatever. It doesn't really matter. She had the power and the agency, to use your word, to think about it differently rather than to succumb to whatever external like system was placed on top of her.
Mm-hmm.
Also, to that point, found tremendous comfort in actually going back to a more school schedule to remind herself to take those breaks. You know what I
Yes,
mean? To take
absolutely.
the holiday break or to take the
Mm-hmm.
spring break, and I'm not necessarily break in the way of like a vacation, but a break in thinking about the ongoing kind of minute by minute, year by year, day by day, etc., like routine of that, and be like, oh, this is just a reawakening of like, I'm in control of my time, or I get to choose how I look at my time.
Right. Because I mean, even 2024, that sounds long, right?
Yeah.
And, 365 days, is
Yeah.
it all going to be the same? So, just like an academic year, rather than just looking at freshman year and sophomore year and junior
Yeah.
year, it's this is the quarter of
Uh-huh.
the year. So, it just, adds a little spiciness to what otherwise, might seem kind of, drawn out and dare I say, monotonous and
Yep.
mundane. The other thing that I loved that mentioned in terms of um, how students
Mm-hmm.
get to approach their year because of the school calendar
Yeah.
year is how even from year to year, because there is, let's say, a difference in teachers,
Mm-hmm.
especially in elementary, you have a different second grade teacher, you have a different
Yep.
third grade teacher, how you can have a fresh start and you can shed how you were perhaps one year and grow into something else because of a fresh start. um, I can't help but think that many of our listeners, readers, and myself included, a frequent New Year's resolution is losing weight.
Yep.
Well, I read somewhere, one of the healthiest types of weight to lose is the weight of the baggage of others' opinions. And that's where you can literally shed that weight of, am I stacking up to this person's expectation? And am I stacking up to that person's expectation? And um, does this person like me? And did I please that other person? It's a wonderful time to kind of take a look at oneself and who and how one wants to be, and kind of double down on that
Mm-hmm.
and prioritize that and shed the weight of having to either be a people pleaser or, you know, feeling that one doesn't, measure up and one
Yeah.
isn't enough or one is too much. And instead, kind of take the time to reflect, like the summer of an academic year is a time to actually get away from
Hmm.
everybody and perhaps reinvent oneself to show up anew for the new fall year,
Hmm.
if we're talking an academic calendar. Well, that's the same thing, so here's January 2024. How do you want to be and who do you want to be and what might you want to shed that you might have carried last year or years prior. Now is the time to do that. And if that seems like a daunting task, then to the point that we're making, take a quarter
Hmm.
to consider it, reflect, discern, write down, so that you know changes, improvements. Well, I hate both of those words actually, but a leveling up can occur the
Yeah.
second quarter. But it doesn't have to, if be this year long,
Uh-huh.
objective where if you don't make the mark in the first 2 weeks, well then it's easy to abandon that
Hmm.
because you're like, well, it's already 2 weeks and I've already failed, so I'm just going to give up on it for the rest
Hmm.
of the year. There goes another New Year's resolution. How about just giving the space and grace of like, okay, I'm gonna look at this calendar year more like an academic year,
Uh,
where in the school of life I'm going to be a student and I'm going to approach this quarterly.
hmm. And you're both teacher and student, so to speak. So if
Yeah,
you always have the ability to start anew, start afresh, if you, to your point about trying something that for yourself that you want to give it a go, and you hit the end of 2 weeks and you're like, no, this doesn't feel right for me. Okay, fine. Shed it and start anew. You have the ability to make that day, that moment, that thought January 1st, whatever. Like that, I think, is the most liberating thing to me about all of that. Is it a very trivial example of what you're talking about is often let's say I was trying to go to the gym, and let's say I there was a week where I just didn't go, and then I was feeling inspired Friday morning, let's just say. How often I would be like, I'll wait till Monday, because Monday is the start of the week. Monday can be the fresh start, and there's something to be said for that. But then it was like, well, why do I have to wait until then? Can I just give myself permission to start on Friday or to start Saturday, whatever it is? So, even more so, not only do we have the agency to shed and then to decide, but we also have the agency to start anew if something doesn't feel right, and begin there. So, I love that as well, building off of what you said. The other thing that I would like to just pull out and see if this, if there's anything more in here. Often I hear of objectives that are about specific things. People want to go to the gym more. They want to lose weight. Often it's something physical related. What you just said, I think, struck me in the idea of shedding emotional baggage, or shedding
absolutely.
anything that's hindering your mental well-being, your heart. I don't think I've ever
Hmm.
thought about resolutions, and I don't really subscribe to them, but I've never really thought about a fresh start being in some way focused on the letting go of people's opinions of me, or letting go of labels that are outdated, or labels that don't feel right for me. I've never really thought about the ways in which I get burdened in that way and can start afresh. So I'm also swimming in the gift that you just gave me of the awareness that I can start afresh with the shedding of emotional and mental baggage that I that's cluttering me and who I am. So thank you for that.
Well, I giggle. I'm so glad that resonated with you. I giggle because that is in fact, my smear model. For new listeners and new viewers, it's as a mindset and well-being coach, a tool that I came up with is an acronym SMEAR, smear. And that stands for situation. And then from that situation, you have minds. You have mental thoughts. From your mind, and those thoughts that you have come your emotions. From the emotions, that drives you to act a certain way, and then you have a result. So that's SMEAR. And the reason why I smile is, with a lot of my clients, what we talk about more than the result that they want to have. I want to lose weight, I want to get healthy, I want to eat better. That's like the result and the action. What actually makes those goals or resolutions not only quote successful, but also sustainable, is really doing the work on addressing the emotions that brought on the actions. And more importantly, what were your thoughts? What's on your mind that gave you those emotions to then have those actions and then the result. So what all I can say is that is the very point. That is actually where one can start, is first addressing or shedding or reinforcing, if it's helpful, reinforcing or shedding how your mindset is, what are your thoughts and what are your emotions, that will make it easier for one to then take the actions that they'd like to do in order to have the results that they are hoping for.
Mhm.
Okay, well, let's take weight loss, for example,
Okay.
because that's so common for many. Okay, so the result that they want is to lose 10 pounds. Okay, so in order to lose the 10 pounds, the action that they have to take is to exercise. Okay. So you can approach the action with shame, like, I gotta go. This is the year I'm gonna finally do it. I lack discipline, but I'm gonna be more disciplined this time. That all sounds positive, right? But actually, if you
Mhm.
peel the layers, those are coming from emotions of
Mhm.
shame, and even like self derision.
Mhm.
That is not very motivating, if you will, to come from that place to then go take the action of exercising or
Yeah.
moving your body to then have the result that you want. So working backwards, if you're like, okay, the result I want is I want to lose 10 pounds. In order to do that, the action I want to take is that I want to quote exercise more. Okay, first peel away, what are your emotions about exercising? Maybe that's actually a trigger word.
Mhm.
So instead of saying I need to exercise more as my action, I need to move my body more. I need to use my body more. Okay, the emotion to feel that is to in order to take that action is more emotion, first of all, where it's not so burdensome, like, oh, I gotta go to the gym. It's more like, oh, I get to move, and I get to move
Mhm.
my body in whatever way I want to. Whether it's dance, or whether it's gardening, or whether it's taking a walk around the block. That emotion is more hopeful. How did you get to that more hopeful emotion so that you're more willing to take the action of moving your body more? It's what your thoughts were
Mhm.
about it, right?
Mhm.
So if you switch your thoughts of I gotta, I have to, I should, but instead, say I get to, or I choose to,
Mhm.
or I'm doing this for the reason of being healthy,
Mhm.
because I want to be there for my future grandchildren. That is a different thought that brings on different motivating emotions, which will change the action, or at least make the action easier, so it'll be easier to get to the result.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. If I can ask some more questions, if that's okay, because we also talked about this idea of or I brought up the idea of looking at shedding of things that have held us, right? Labels. So
Mhm.
I'm going to use your example on myself in a very real way. Okay.
Mhm.
A couple years ago, I had the goal of losing weight. I don't think I had a specific amount, but it was tied to this label that I believed that I was fat, right? That there was this self-imposed belief about my body and an image and whatnot. So my result of losing weight was connected with my own kind of deeply internalized belief about myself. Where in that would, in the smear model, would the label associated with that goal, that kind of self derision that you used, where would that come out? And then how would reframing or thinking about the goal of losing weight actually the act of looking backwards and finding where that label existed, how would that all play? I in into the smear model, and then my own rethinking about what my resolution, so to speak, was, or my goal of losing weight.
So let's say that you were 10 pounds overweight. So
Yep.
that's the objective. That's
Yes.
the objective fact. Like nobody can debate that the scale said this,
Sure.
and for whatever
Yep.
reason, 10 pounds was what was necessary. So that's the situation.
Sure.
That's the S. Your thoughts about it. I'm so fat. Here I am again. People are looking at me.
Mm-hmm.
People are judging me. That's the M. That's
Mm-hmm.
in your mind. That's the thoughts that you have. Whereas it could have been, oh, just 10 pounds. So I'm going to start with 10 pounds. That's my thought. So my thought of the 10 pounds isn't with such weighty, no pun intended, but like weighty, almost disgust,
Yeah.
because the disgust becomes the emotion because of the thoughts that you are feeling. So you shed those thoughts of, I'm so fat and people are looking at me, and I'm never going to lose the weight. Here I am again.
Yep.
Those thoughts, you shed that and instead say, you know, it's 10 pounds. It's doable. I have the knowledge of how to do it. I'm just going to apply it. And you know what? Now my emotion is I feel hopeful. I feel motivated. I feel that I can do it. That will help you take the action that you want to see, which will then end up with a result that you would like. That's why nowadays, a lot of weight loss plans
Uh-huh.
are actually addressing the
Yep.
psychology behind it. Because let's be honest, the knowledge is all there. The information is at everybody's fingertips.
Yeah.
It's not that people need to know more and that they're lacking in the knowledge of what is healthy for them, or they're lacking in the knowledge that what exercise helps. No, everybody knows that. What is stopping us, and I myself included, I mean, I'm still battling my COVID weight gain and perimenopausal belly and all this kind of stuff, so I'm including myself in there. We have the knowledge. It's we need to address our thoughts and our emotions so that we can take action to have the results that we want, because we already know truly what to do. There's different diets that we can try, but ultimately it's still the same messaging in
Mm-hmm.
terms of, eat well, eat healthy, sleep, and move.
Yeah.
But somehow, some way, our thoughts are, I'm too busy, or this something else is more important, so I'm not going to make time on my calendar. The thoughts get in the way and make us feel a certain way, which self-perpetuates the self-sabotaging actions, so we never get the result that we want.
Okay, so if I can build off that, and please correct me if my misunderstanding is off base here, but this is ultimately why I asked that question, because the idea of starting afresh, starting anew, having a fresh start, in my mind, allows for that room to go back to that M moment in the smear model. And the reason why I say that is because for many times I had, the goal, I'm going to start the year, I'm going to lose all this weight, blah, blah, blah. And then I quote unquote failed. And that was now a compounded moment of like, I'm lazy, I never finish anything. And now there's this cyclical kind of, imposition of all these different labels of my thoughts and then emotions and etc. But the starting afresh allows for whatever happened to happen, and then an ability to come back to the situation again and look at it hopefully differently, or at least anew. So that's why I ultimately asked that question, is because when we kicked off the episode of a fresh start, even in the pursuit of something like losing weight, should it not go the way that one had hoped, there's still an ability to come back and revisit and look inward before moving forward again. Does any of that make sense?
Well, when you said the words, look at it anew, that's the M. Those are your
Yeah.
thoughts. That's in your mind. So you can think about the situation differently. So rather than the here I am again, 10 pounds, to go. I mean, I myself personally, I've lost, 500 pounds in a year because I keep gaining and losing the same 10 pounds. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, but I can either approach that with what I just joked about, which is here I'm again, I
Right.
suck, and here,
Yep.
I'm going to do this again, and here we go, one more try, but I don't know if I'm going to do it. Or I can, just kind of demystify it or destigmatize it and just say, okay, 10 pounds. Maya Angelou's quote, when you know better, you do better. That is actually a more not just positive like toxic positivity, but really that is a different cognitive way to
Mhm.
approach a situation is okay, yes, here I am again, but I'm not going to shame myself that I'm here again because guess what? I know better. And, you know, we talk about life being, school and we're students of life. Okay, so that pop quiz didn't go so well.
Mhm.
Here's just yet another attempt at the same test, and but this time for this test I'm better armed, so let's go. That the same situation can be approached with different thoughts, which different mindset,
Mhm.
which will bring on different emotions, and very likely can bring about different actions, which will then produce a different result. And
Earlier,
that's,
yeah,
can I just
please.
say to, it's super, I don't want to use the word easy, but it's very common is really the word I should say. It's very common to, when we talk about, New Year's resolutions, again, we talk a lot about weight or exercise or
Yeah.
getting healthy or whatever. But it's really important, and I do put this on the table. Um, it's getting our minds healthy, that's just as important as our bodies. I say this, and I have said this so many times on our podcast, which, especially as a sports medicine doctor, I know many a supremely physically healthy person whose minds really need healing
Mhm.
because there's a lot of wounds there. I don't say that with derogatory judgment. I actually say that with so much compassion and empathy that their bodies might be, physical specimens of perfection, but boy, at what cost and expense, and almost at the denial of one's mental health. So it is just as important a resolution in terms of losing 10 pounds or getting to the gym more. It's just as important a resolution of, what, I am going to take a look at, examine, nurture, and care for my mental health. And that comes from looking at your thoughts on your identity, your thoughts on how you show up in situations, your thoughts on your personality. Your
Uh,
personality isn't your destiny. Your personality can be your tendencies, your personality can be a trait, but it isn't, necessarily a life sentence. So even that can, be weighed and either shed or
mhm.
reinforced based on your mindset and approach.
Mhm. So, as you were talking, it made me think about therapy in my own life. And for the longest time, I resisted going to therapy. I resisted going to therapy because my thoughts, my M about therapy, were what you would
M
anticipate.
for mind, everybody, in
Mind,
case you're
yes.
like, do you not know how to spell thoughts? It's not with an M. Because
Yes.
in the smear, M is for the mind, and that's where your thoughts reside. Sorry.
And I'm the student that's like, I've got the model. I'm going to use the letters. Yes. Um, so anyway, my thoughts around therapy were as I would imagine you could probably anticipate that I believed only certain people went to therapy, and if you went to therapy, that meant certain things, and I don't even want to give them credit because I don't believe them anymore.
Mhm.
But upon my first day of going to see a therapist, my therapist said, "Why are you here?" Right, and I was prepared for that answer, and I said, because I spend so much time on my physical health. I go to the gym, I walk. Why am I not taking as much care and devoting as much energy to my mental health, which is really the core of everything else? And I have never.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
exactly. Not they're I love that you said that they're the core of everything else, meaning it's actually intertwined. The irony is, as many of my clients have found, when you address and optimize your mindset and your emotions, which all are integral to mental health. When you address that and optimize that, then actually the physical health, the physical changes almost come naturally,
Yeah.
almost like second nature, because you have addressed and optimized your mental well-being.
Mm-hmm. So so I bring that up because in this spirit of the new year, and also in the school of life, as we've talked about, being students, we can determine what our quarters look like. We can determine the amount of time that we have in a project or a unit or a semester or whatever. The opportunity to start afresh in addressing and optimizing one's mindset is always within one's control, is always within one's ability. And so I just wanted to bring that together, because that's why I was so grateful that you brought the smear model in, because that's exactly what I think we were talking about when we were thinking about starting afresh or starting anew or looking at something anew, is exactly this. And then the gift that you gave me that I hadn't even put together was the idea that truly shedding, or at least looking anew at one's whatever one's hopes are, really begin with you, with your mind and your mindset, and addressing that. And that what was the term that you used, the intertwinement of all of that. So thank you for bringing that up, because that has like just landed me like a huge light bulb moment in all of this. So thank you. So I don't know how to wrap us up there, but I feel like I kind of did. Anyway.
Well, at the heart of a healthy mindset is knowing that one is not just simply enough,
But more than enough.
just as you are. Period.
Period.
Mwah.
Mwah.
Happy New
Happy
Year,
New Year.
everybody.